Welcome to KBcast, the podcast for security executives, interviewing people from around the globe on how organizations can operate smarter and stay safer. Here's Carissa Breen.
I recently spoke with Rafael and we discussed his near-death experience and how that propelled him to think outside the box and how he approached security. We covered a variety of topics including real versus perceived threats and how security teams need to be communicating these internally. If you'd like to know more, then please keep on listening. Okay, so Rafael, I remember meeting you actually. I think it was last year. I did personal branding workshop and you were traveling through Sydney and you happened to come along. Something inside of me was like, oh, this guy's really curious about certain things. And then I was like, I've got to get him on the podcast. So it's taking me this long to get you on the podcast and I apologize. I've been following some of your updates online. I'm seeing some of your stuff. So I'm definitely super keen to get your thoughts and opinions on some questions that I think that are really relevant in today's industry. But before we get into that, I'd like to start off knowing about your journey. And can you walk our listeners through where you started to where you are now?
Yes, of course. And thank you for inviting me. It's good to catch up with you. Well, I started from the beginning. I started my career in IT about 20 years ago when I was studying back at uni, my bachelor's in systems engineering, building some websites focused mostly on software development. And I started to experiment with vulnerabilities at that time. And I saw how easy it was to hack into systems, which led me to become a software security development. And then I started to be a consulting and consulting space, and then leading teams for multinational organizations. At some point, I immigrated to Australia, just seeking new adventures. Then I started a software developer gig with Virgin Australia, turned into security operations, leadership, advisory. As I progressed my career, I moved to Allianz, Worldwide Partners, as an information security officer / head of IT security. And I'm now an information security manager for Workova. My specialization is on security strategy and leadership, but I feel that the more I progress on my career, I become more of a marketer because my role is to communicate, influence people, so these people can make decisions and exercise good judgment to protect the business value. I think at the time when we were talking, it was more about self-promoting the brand and how to manage negativity and positivity on the social media. From what I remember at that time, you explained to me, I said, well, how do we manage all this negativity that's around cyber? And if I don't remember this incorrectly, you say, well, once people start to be too negative on social media, they start to become that guy. It's that guy that's always putting negative feedback. So we started to go into that sideline of how to on how to build your own brand and the positive turn that you need to handle in order to become an influencer. Otherwise, you get relegated to the side. And yeah, I fully agree with that at that time. I think that's what we were discussing at that time.
Yeah, that's right. And you're right when you say that guy, because there is that guy or that lady that has those negative connotations associated with them by what they publish, by how they communicate to people in the industry online. And there's nothing wrong with disagreeing. And I always say that there's nothing wrong with difference of opinions. That's how we learn and grow and evolve. But one of the things that I don't agree with is if people are just blatantly rude, disrespectful, derogatory, racist, sexist. There's still that online, and I just don't think that it really helps anyone. And it definitely doesn't help the person who's trying to one-up someone. It actually makes them look really, really bad. And I don't know how many ways I can try to explain that. And I think it's really just people having self-awareness and understanding that, oh, if I say this, I am going to be that guy.
Yeah, fully agree. I think I tied up to at the end, leave a constructive note. It doesn't matter if there's a disagreement, but what are we doing to do something of change? What are we doing to make it better? And this is what I think it fails. Or some people fail.
So when you say some people, like, can you give an example of what you're seeing? What type of things are you sort of seeing that people are doing that doesn't really help the industry?
Yeah, well, I think that there's a couple of things. I think that I've seen particularly a couple of guys that move into the penetration testing that are always posting the breaches that some companies go through and how badly are those companies dealing with that. And that's it. That's the point. In that respect, giving a criticism is okay as long as there's a solution or I propose an idea, because otherwise finger pointing is not going to be any use for these companies or anyone else. Because at the end, we all have a data breach. It's the data that's around is just too much to protect everywhere. And we have to find better ways to deal with data breaches and the like. Just pointing fingers and say these guys are doing bad and they're not doing enough and stop is not going to be of assistance to whoever suffered the breach, the people affected by the breach, or anyone surrounding it. It much will be better to say, give advice. For example, I think if the same people would say, okay, these people got breached, but if you have been breached, call this number, call the ACAC, they will help you. Call ID Care, call these people. This is how you can get help. And I think that's a bit the part that might be missing. Too much negativity in an already threatening topic as cybersecurity.
No, you're right. And I think one of the things that I wanted to understand from your opinion, because you're obviously in a leadership role, you've held multiple leadership roles. What's your sort of read on it when you're seeing, like you said, these guys in pen testing that are putting up, oh, so-and-so company got hacked, they got owned or whatever it is. What's your sort of feedback when you're reading stuff like this, considering you're in a leadership position, which means that you have influence over what you're doing with your team and the security direction of your organization? How are you sort of responding to people's opinions online that aren't giving a solution, like you said?
Well, I think the only problem is that there's a way when we can create facts and obtain facts and use those facts to protect our own organizations and give some awareness to executives or stakeholders or on real life examples like this. Yes, this is happening. And yes, we need to protect ourselves from this that is happening. But once people get bombarded with this, everything is wrong, everyone is hacked, everyone is losing data, then there's a couple of things. One, people become desensitized to the message. It's like, oh my God, I hear this so often that I just don't care anymore. And the way I see it is a bit that limbic brain part that fights, flees, or gets steady and gets paralyzed. When people hear that too much, they either can try to fight it, try to flee and say, oh, this is not happening. It will never happen to me. I don't care. Or just be paralyzed. Like, well, if it's going to happen anyway, why do we do something? Why do I need to invest my money on this? And the positive turn that I try to give to these messages is, look, these people, we all will suffer a breach. Everyone will suffer a breach at some point, or most companies. It's just too complex to try to defend all the touch points on any company. So it's better that we are prepared. Yes, we will face it, but are we prepared to deal with that? Are we ready? What assurance are we giving to our customers? What assurance are we giving to the board? And what are our weak points? So in trying to turn that positive spin, it's a bit more easy when you do it internally. But online, it's a bit of an open statement on the negative side. So the challenge of turning that negative context into a positive context, well, I guess that it's easier to write only the negative, but it's a bit more complex to write what can you do about that. So I think that will be my view on that. If people can post not only the negative, but how to deal with the negative, it will not only help themselves, but it will help other companies to understand how this data, how these details about the breach will be useful to that company to protect themselves. Yeah.
No, you're right. I'd like to take a moment and talk more about your near-death experience and how that really jump-started your path to mindfulness.
Yeah, yes. This is also quite an interesting story that I usually keep to myself, but it's a sake of openness. So when I was back in Mexico, I was doing crazy hours in IT, as everyone does over there. It's common to hear from people that work anything between 10 to 14 hours per day, sometimes with weekends. Now, I was working hard. I was not really having too much conversations with family or friends. I was making lots of money and pretty good financially. And then I sort of caught a virus. It felt like I had a flu. After 2 months of having that flu, I just couldn't start walk anymore. And then I was taken to the emergency room. I started losing my vision. I started losing my walk and the lung capacity to breathe. So eventually a doctor figured out that it was something called Miller-Fisher or Guillain-Barré, which is a virus that attacks the nervous system. So what it did to me, or the virus caused, is that I started to lose my nervous system and with that the breathing capacity. So then when I stayed about in ER for about 10 days, and they basically told me, well, you better arrange your paperwork, because you have a 50% chance of dying. So those 10 days, those 10 days in ER, and look, I know it sounds fantastic, but it did happen. I was there. After seeing the light, the tunnel, the light, and the person at the end saying, it's not your time yet, and returning. I mean, 10 days confined into ER, intubed, and just thinking of what's going to happen, started to reassess my life choices. I started to realize that I would not take forward anything that I had accumulated. If at all, I will bring my own experiences. But what was the impact that I caused in people? At that time, I thought, well, the impact on people that I have is, I'm not here for my family. I'm just looking for the next gig, which is paying well, and I'm getting what is in for me. Then I started to shift and say, well, what can I do to change this? What is the difference what is the lessons that this is getting to me? How am I going to overcome this, and how am I going to become stronger? And for some reason, I started to think it's on the positive impression and the positive value that I deliver to others. So this change of view led me to start studying more about why was I being so self-protective and so risk-averse, and led me to learn more about some religion, neuroscience, and that understanding of the limbic brain, which is the one that protects us and makes us to want to accumulate things, and led me to meditation, which started to move to the path of, okay, how can I deliver most value, and how can I get away from my own constructed reality of my mind and be more present in the real life, and making a change, or a positive change or a positive value to everyone surrounding me. And that's how I started to have that journey. Like, it's been like a 10-year-old journey on this path. And of course, now try to apply it on every stage of my life, but mostly on cyber, because I feel it's just quite challenging to manage such a threatening topic on a mindful way. Because that's what I believe, that's what the limbic brain does. It jumps straight into alert, there's something happening. So how can I take a step back, kind of breathe, let it sink, now think, and then act? And how can I convince people to do the same? Or how can I influence people to do the same?
Wow. Well, firstly, thanks for sharing that story. I think that something that we've never really had on our podcast before, people really opening up and vulnerable about certain aspects of their life. And I think that there'll be a lot of people listening that can potentially relate to your story, or can definitely gain something from your experience through that. And I think one of the things that you mentioned, threatening topics on a mindful brain. So is that what you meant by just taking a moment, taking a breath? Because like you said, especially in your types of roles, it is full on. There's always something happening. Do you think that people just get really caught up and just racing all of the time and not really taking a moment to have that clarity before they make a decision?
Yes, of course. So what I think, based on what I've studied, is I would say the limbic brain. It's that part of our brain that makes us see a stick that looks like a snake and then jump out. Mm-hmm. So that is the brain that is not taking the part of the brain that is not taking the time to assess if that brown, elongated, threatening stick is really a snake or not. We just have to jump out. But this is the stuff that makes us survive as a species. Now, the thing about this is that if we're not fully mindful or aware that this might be happening, this translates into our life and in cyber as well. Like, there's a cyber threat. There's a breach. There's a phishing campaign. There's this new law. So it's easier to start and jumping into the, let's panic. What are we doing about this? And not take a stepping back and say, well, are we really affected by this? How is this affecting our deliveries? Or how do we translate the message into a way that people will understand and not jump into panic mode and start to, again, be more mindful and more intuitive in dealing with this new phishing, threat, regulation, virus, whatever you call it. So how do we avoid crying wolf and be more present and realistic in what we're dealing with? So I think it's quite challenging in general for practitioners as well as people affected by this to take a step back, but it's possible.
Is that what sort of inspired you to bring these types of practices into your work, because you can see the benefits of it and the study that you've been doing? And has that sort of then sparked you to educate people on sort of self-awareness?
Yes, that's correct. I found that when I craft messages, based on a number of years and a vast amount of mistakes, I found that people react much better when we educate them to be mindful on cyber. This in practical steps. This is the stop, think, act. Stop, don't react. Think. How are you going to react, and then take an action. But when I take the message, I always carry the same message to be intuitive. Take a step back, take a breath, and then exercise your judgment when you're reacting to cyber at home, at work, or anywhere. Because this landscape is not only affecting businesses, it's affecting people at their homes as well. It's affecting senior people. It's affecting almost anywhere. Australia is a major target due to the financial capacity that we have here and the trust that we have in other people. That is being exploited. So how can we craft a message for all our people to say, even that someone is asking for my help, even that someone is yelling at me, even that someone is being threatening me, how can I put myself in that distance, put that distance between me and my response? How can I make my judgment? How I do not react? And that's when I craft messages that emotionally connect to people. Say, look, don't have a process 1, 2, 3. You can do that, but it's not easy to exercise once you're dealing with something critical. Instead, use your gut feel, use your intuition, take a pause. Once we take a pause and we make that connection, telling them you can take a pause, then people will have more space to think of what we're doing and much trust in themselves to do the right thing, to react much better before that threat.
You spoke before about, do you see this as a bit challenging for certain people? Why do you think that's the case? Is it because people just aren't really used to it? It's not something like mindfulness is it's come around recently in terms of the word, like the wording of it and that sort of that buzzword. Do you think it's just because no one's really ever taught us this stuff before? Like no one teaches this in universities, no one teaches this in any sort of certification or any type of formal training. Is that what the challenge is that you're sort of seeing in people to adopt this approach?
Well, mindfulness is a bit of a bossy trend right now. It's a trend right now, and I think it's funny. Like if you ask me, I feel it's a bit like the Western world waking up to the idea that we can take a pause and that we don't need to live this accelerated life, just buying things and get bombarded by what we have to have and how we need to respond quickly and the way that we have to compete in the Western society. I think. Progressively, we in general, the people in Australia and many parts of the world, are taking this ownership of their own selves, or starting to realize that it's okay that we take some space. It's okay to take the space, and it's okay to think and not react quickly as is expected from us. Once I observe that a bit more, I see that everywhere. I see this in the way that we do the media. It's always responding to something, Instagram, Facebook, television. But once you start, people that start doing yoga or any other mindful practice, any other meditation, even with religion, looking more within themselves is easier to make that space and give yourself a bit more time to have better outcomes rather than fast outcomes. Fast is fine, as long as it's the right thing to do. When fast is not the right thing to do, then we have a problem. How is it teach? Well, I think it's a couple of generations that have been implementing this. I think that the previous generation was too busy getting out of poverty, war, and the like. My generation had more time to dig inside of us and be more aware. And the next generation, I think they're living quite fast, but at the same time, in freedom and more rich of information. So this kind of information is easy to get into their hands, should they wish to apply it. Should it be taught? Well, there's some schools in the US that are teaching meditation. I know that some schools in Queensland are starting to teach mindfulness to children. A number of corporations are embedding mindfulness. So in general, I see quite a change since the 10 years I've been doing this, particularly the last couple of years have made quite a difference. I see more acceptance within this idea of being mindful.
I think you're always going to take that moment to think about how you are going to respond, because if you're doing that knee-jerk reaction, like you said, just doing things fast doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way. So I definitely agree, especially when you are doing with security, that things are going to happen all of the time. It also can be, because I've actually read a bit of this stuff as well, about your brain and stuff like that in terms of neuroscience. And I think one of the things is it can be quite exhausting as well if you're constantly in a state of trying to fight or flight. It can really exhaust your mind and your body. So I think it's something that we shouldn't be in that constant state and have that moment to actually then think about what we're going to do and then respond, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's adrenal fatigue. All your adrenal glands are fatigued because they're always releasing chemicals to fight or flight. Yeah, and I know it really is active. Sometimes it could be acting out of compulsiveness. And it's just something that it's a subtle tone that it's sometimes what we practice is more noticeable. One detecting oneself or myself is acting out of compulsiveness rather than a full presence.
What I'd like to talk to you about now is your opinion on the Open Office initiative, investing in relationships and sort of staying away from the basement. And I ask this because security has traditionally been more of its own silo. And lately I'm seeing more leaders opening up about this topic, whether it's on their podcast or just online, and how they are trying to integrate more with the business.
Well, during the last years, it has become more clear that cybersecurity is something that everyone needs to do and everyone is responsible for, rather than allocating all the responsibility to a security team in a business or a government or a business if you're at home. The trend that I've seen now, and it's becoming more clear, is that the cybersecurities are moving from being policemen and saying, you can do this, you can do this, you're going to get fined, I'm behind you, to become doctors. So say, look, you shouldn't be doing this. This is a risky behavior. But if you're proceeding, we will support you, but you have to sign it off. So it's that communication piece. It needs to be divulged within the organization in order to influence more people, in order to spread communications. I implemented this, what I call the Open Office, which is literally Open Office. Anyone can come with any questions at almost any time. So what this causes is for people to start to release every sort of questions. Some of them have been quite surprising. Some of them have been quite challenging. But what the results in that is that people start to be more trustful in the security team and be more open. And this leads to start uncovering things that otherwise security will not be able to surface. Like, for example, once there's more there's more trust being gained, then people start to bring holes either in processes or in software or flaws that they found within themselves, but they were not able to report because of fear or unknownness or the like. The thing about the Open Office as well is that it cannot be judgment. It cannot be with a judgment. It cannot be with a reprimand. If someone did the wrong thing, it's fine to tell them what is the cause of the thing that they have done and how to prevent it later. But the moment that someone is reprimanded or feel that they've done the wrong thing and they're being judged, then they're not going to come back.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Once you see people that they tell each other, oh, I just went to the security team, I told them that I fell for a fish, and they were nice about it. They told me to change my passwords, change my MFA, whatever technical company, and they told me to do this, and now I can do this at home. And then they tell other people, and then other people come as well. So it becomes a chain of trust where people bring forward their security needs. And I think this is very important because cyber, as we see in the media, as we see in LinkedIn, as we see in the news, is very threatening. This image of a hoodie hacker hacking into your systems and getting your data and opening a loan for you and God knows why. Huh? So once we say, look, yeah, this happens, but we're here to help you. Oh, thank you for telling me. We will do something about it. Or they're like, oh, look, this is a big mistake, but this is how we correct it, and we will put something in place to prevent this from happening again. Then it becomes a constructive chat. And it does become I know better than you, or why did you do this? It's more like, we find a solution for you, let's find it together. It's way more effective, and it's more efficient in gaining the trust of people. The disclaimer of the Open Office, and this is very clear, it takes a lot of resources. It takes a lot of time because more people come and you have to stop activities. And people can come with any sort of questions, some more interesting than others. The the examples that I think is one lady that asked me to install a virus because it was attached to a program that was very useful. So look,
okay.
Yeah,
right.
It was okay. I understand your question, and but this is why we don't do it. We don't use a virus for the sake of a problem because you will find that useful. And the other one was with a CEO that asked me why it's so important to protect an email if the information of an email of a personal email is not that important or is not really a important corporate asset. So I thought at the time I was a bit perplexed. So okay, I thought you would know this, but it doesn't matter. You're seeing this from the strategic point of view. So then we continued on giving an answer that will satisfy the executive needs. So it's interesting, it's surprising, but it's also fulfilling, knowing that your team is preparing people to be cyber savvy, if you like, and prepared.
So why do you think security has traditionally been sort of the basement? I've spoken to a number of people actually on the podcast recently, but just in general. Why do you think that they have sort of kept to themselves rather than trying to go out and be collaborative, similar to what you've been speaking about?
Well, I think it's because of, I would say it's two streams to this question. One is that cybersecurity is technically complex. It has the surface of security is just so vast. I would think it's one of the most vast or most extensive fields that exist right now, because we have to cover so many aspects of security, from financial, strategic, law, technical, operational, strategic. It's not easy to do this stuff. On top of that, there's a lot of technicalities that it's at times it can be difficult to translate them to people that are not familiar with the terms. This tied to mindfulness. People, security specialists, sometimes don't put themselves on the context of the people receiving information. Mm-hmm. People tend to communicate on their own context, which is not so much. It's not so much on considering what's the target audience. How are we going to put the language in something that they will understand? Then communication is not easy. Then I have to stay back because no one understands me and no one listens to me. Well, in my view, it's mostly because we haven't been able, or the person haven't been able, to translate to a message that is easily understood by the business or by the stakeholder. The other stream that I was thinking of is that many professionals, and I would say this in all sort of industries, think within their context and what's the benefit and the needs for them and what they need to deliver. Cybersecurity is the same. It's okay, what do I need to deliver? How do I need to protect? What do I need to do? What do I need to protect my business from? But there are some people, but not many, that translate what we do into supporting what the business is doing. So if you ask a lot of people, a lot of IT people, why are you doing what you're doing? Mm-hmm. They say, well, because we're putting the systems up, or because we're running systems that need to be on. Yeah, but why? Because we have customers. Okay, what do we do for the customers? And they get lost. And I'm sure it's the same with security. You know? Why are we doing these firewalls, emails, and the like? And why? Oh, because we protect our company. Okay, how are we supporting our business? What's the mission and the vision of our business? How are we supporting our vision? And then there's silence. So to me, the breakout to my career, what I feel that made a difference, is when I started to understand that stakeholders, executives, and anyone outside security care for security, but care more about the delivery. So how do you translate what you're doing into a value or into a tangible value to support what people are doing, what people are delivering, the service that they're delivering, which can't be translated into protecting the customer details, availability of the systems, protecting the revenue and the like. But making that bridge and that translation can be the difference between getting back in or getting back into the basement.
So do you think this translating deficiency has been the shortfall of security sort of moving forward in your experience?
I think so. I think it's based on the foundations of security, which come from technical languages. So as people or cybersecurity leaders move more and become more aware of the people factor or the strategy factor, then the conversations become more easy. If you see a security operations team, a SOC, you wouldn't put them in touch directly with an executive unless they're really well trained. But the language that each level of a strategy management uses is quite important to communicate. I feel it's changing, but I think it's the residual from the discipline that we follow. It was mostly technical, which now it's moving more to a strategic place, more people place.
One thing I find interesting that I've asked multiple people, again, on the podcast is people who are super technical, for some reason, I feel that they try to position themselves as better than people who potentially are more hybrid, like doing the translating, or people that really are not technical but are very good at communicating, for example. So what's your sort of response to that? Because I see it a lot online, like, oh, well, you're not technical, so you're sort of redundant. Whereas I don't think that's the case. I think it's just changing face now. I think there's needs for both, but I don't think one's better than the other. But I still do see a lot of super technical people going around thinking that they are better than other people in industry because of what they do day to day. But I'm hearing a lot more leadership type of positions sort of say, like, no, that's not necessarily the case. We actually do value people that can communicate, that can understand the technical, but communicate in ways that people understand. That's just something that I'm seeing, and it's something that I like to keep asking about, because I don't think it's that really that helpful.
Well, I think we need those technical people. Huh? Those technical people are the ones that dive into the dark sides of security and do all the interesting stuff and the very mentally challenging and technically challenging stuff. If I had a message, I feel like I was one of them. I was very technical, and I was getting quite frustrated when I didn't have any buy-in from the business, despite giving evidence that we needed that. What worked for myself, and I would say to other people, is learn about, if not mindfulness, learn about what is in for the people hearing your message. Not what's in for you, not what's fun for you, not what it's needed for you, and how are you protecting or defending against this. Think about what is in for them, for the people that are listening to your message. Then the context will change. If I tell someone we receive 100 attacks per day and with a 50% efficiency, and they're coming attached with a MONET or MONET Trojan, I can be quite smart, but that doesn't mean anything. When I say to someone, a strategy, I say we have an increased number of attacks that people are falling through, which are increasing our risk and our potential loss to data breaches. That's their language. So it's better to use the language, and then you can give it technicalities. Otherwise, it's speaking Japanese versus English. It's the message. If you want something from them, use their language. Don't use yours.
Agreed. Agreed.
It's not for you. It's for them.
Agreed. Let's talk about real versus perceived threats. So communicating real risks, staying away from promoting uncertainty and fear, because I see a lot of fear promoted on the communication level that you just discussed before. That's online in the media. So can you sort of explain from your point of view why people should stop communicating in this way specifically?
Well, I think it boils down to a single story. It's the boy that cried wolf. What we see in security is what we are always alerting. Well, we're not always alerting, but we are very aware of all the alerts that are happening. And you will see that with time, once this message is across the organization and say, this happened to these people, this happened to these people, this breach happened to these people, and this virus happened to these people, eventually someone will ask, oh, well, but it hasn't happened to us, so why do we care? And that's sort of the being desensitized. I hear it so often that I just don't care anymore, because one, it doesn't happen to me, or two, it's just too much. Why do I even bother? Why do I have to care? So at least my goal from there has been moving from that permanent fear and exhausting position of putting people into fear on a permanent state to move into a sense of we are always working, and we will be continue to working on protecting our company. Because yes, there are threats out there, and yes, we can get breached, but we are prepared. And I think if I could simplify it, it's something like we have your back. You do what you're doing because you have your back. Get me quite involved. Get me informed. I will inform you. But let's get this symbiosis. We keep involved as a stakeholder, and we assess you. We tell you what your risks are. We help you to manage your risks. There will be some risks that will remain, and they will be owned, and they will be managed, and be aware of this. But the reality and the facts are this, and this is the reality that we're seeing. All these imaginations and mind trips into what the worst could happen, it's okay to consider them, but making them a reality and bringing them to the company is not going to be productive. It's not a sustainable strategy. It's better when we say this, what we have in place to protect us from these things. And if we don't want to do something about this specific threat that is very specific to us, we can do that, but just be aware that we are running a risk, and someone in this company owns that risk. And there's a potential damage to the company. Call it reputation, call it jail time, call it a breach to a law. that someone needs to sign off. So it becomes a tangible conversation rather than just, as you say, a limbic, adrenaline exhausting conversation, like everything is wrong, everything is bad, everything could happen. No, we know what could happen. We manage the risk, we accept. Some things we don't know what could happen. We're prepared with an incident response. And the things that we know, the things that we can do, these are the things that we can do and the maturity level that we have and where we're going. It's an assurance space. It's a digital trust space rather than a jumpy space of there's so many things wrong that have happened that I cannot handle them. Just, yes, we can handle them. This is how we do it.
So, why do you think there's so much negative talk around the whole cyberspace? Like you said, that it's a threatening language. Why do you think people are going about it like that anyway, in just your experience? Like, I'm just curious.
It's almost like a mystic. Cyber is like a mystic experience, you know. It's if I wasn't technical and I saw someone in the news saying, "Oh, these guys took over my email account and opened an email and a bank account and took all my data," it would be like, "Oh my God, that's magic! How do they make it?" And I would be, "Oh, can that happen to me?" And I just be a bit petrified. And that is the exploitable part of the news. The problem with this is that the security at times cannot be very tangible until something happens, because basically we're fighting off risks and fighting off threats. The way we can have some metrics on how many attacks we deferred, but we cannot be very specific on how much damage we prevented, unless we have very firm facts that happen. So then it becomes a little bit of a interpretation game. Right? Okay, I put this antivirus, which stopped this virus that happened to other people, which make other company lose $1 million. It becomes more tangible, but in the meantime, in that language, the risk is lost. Right? I got there's hackers everywhere. There's North Korea. There's countries attacking each other. It's a chaos. It's a wild west out there. I think people naturally become a bit defensive towards cyber. You know, it's quite threatening to everyone, to people at home and people at businesses. So I think that's why you gain the bad reputation. Well, it's not bad reputation, the threatening reputation. And we have a number of vendors of cybersecurity that, in order to sell the services, they put a worst scenario on. Yes, I agree, it could happen, but we also need to be aware of the context and other surroundings in our environment, like budgeting, maturity, and the like. So it's difficult to see the whole context and see the full reality, rather than only. It's easy to focus on the threatening reality than see the whole context. So I think that is why it gets such a bad reputation by the public in general.
So where do you believe leaders should be focusing when it comes to the right communication to executives?
I think that leaders should be focusing on hearing the needs of the executives and clearly communicating how the cybersecurity strategy is supporting the business goals. I'm moving away from telling at executives. A good place to start is to be fully aware of the mission and vision of the company. What are the company's strategic projects in place, and how cybersecurity is protecting the value and managing the risk tied to those assets. Executives should also be informed on the current status of the security, on the maturity, and what's their responsibility on the residual risks. I've seen that experience that some technical information is delivered to the executives and is not translated properly to what they need. The board usually cares about the revenue, the risk, and the costs. And when people come and say there was 100 phishing attempts, it doesn't tell what does that mean to the revenue or to the cost. It tells a bit of the risk. So that conversation needs to be changed. Now, on this bit, one of the biggest challenges that I face with executives is the idea that cyber is not important, delivery is more important, or the cyber slows progress. It's quite challenging because I think that they consume financial resources and they therefore have a large impact on the revenue. I think, for example, in that side, I will craft my communication to make clear how cyber supports not only the executives but the business to protect the revenue, reduce risk, meet compliance, and lawful requirements that be invested on the executives. So it's more about what's in for them as well, and what's for the benefit of the company, not only the benefit for cyber.
So do you think, give you an example, Shane, the security dude, comes in, tries to explain, oh, look, these are all the things that all the IPs that we've blocked, and we've done this, and we've bought this new threat intelligence platform, blah, blah, blah. Do you think when those sort of conversations are happening, the executives are just like, they're not really listening at that point because A, they have no clue what he's going on about, but then B, they've kind of lost him. And again, he hasn't really brought proper context to the conversation. Do you think that's where it's becoming, I don't know, quote unquote, leaky funnel then? Because I get the idea, but the execution is wrong in terms of how they're going about trying to deploy their message in a way that ultimately these executives are going to want to care about. Is that where you're seeing a lot of people just blatantly going wrong?
I completely agree. And again, I think the foundation of this is coming out from the technical discipline rather than the strategy discipline. And I will only use this message, this more technical message, if the person hearing me is technically aware of what I'm talking about. If you go back, sometimes even CIOs don't fully know the technicals because the view is strategic. Mm-hmm. Coming to them, to the executives and say, we bought this money and we implemented this technology that it protects us from this. Even that doesn't have much value.
No.
The value is when we make clear how is this investment protecting the business and protecting the value that we hold. Call it financial, call it reputation, call it customer information. What is the direct link between their investment and a gain for the company? And it may be that there's no need for any technical chat. It's just a very overview of the strategy and the results of this thing that we placed. What's the result in the company? I think it's one of the biggest challenges of finding the people that are able to have that chat, that they can move between the technical, the people, and the strategic point of view.
Do you think it's just because these people are techies and they actually enjoy technology and they get really excited, like a kid in a candy shop, for example, people that are really into cars, they'll talk about exhaust and, twin turbos and things like that. And there's probably some people that know a lot more stuff than me. But when they start talking about this type of stuff, you're like, oh, I've lost you. Like, they're just focusing more on the finer details rather than the overall picture. Cool, what does the overall car do? And I sort of see the same approach in security as well. Like, these people probably did progress through the ranks. They started off as a developer and then they've moved their way sideways and then upwards and then got into more of a leadership role. So they do come from that heavily technical background. So they love it and they live and breathe it. But then they're also at their own detriment then as well, because it's focusing so much on that, they can't actually get their main point across, which is focusing on, like you said, the revenue, the risk, the cost, and less on the bells and whistles of the technology they've just spent $3 million on.
Yeah, I fully agree. Like, I understand the passion for technology. You know, I have it myself. As I grow a little bit older, my passion is getting somewhere else, more in the people. I feel that people have a passion for technology. And if that's the bread and call, then stick to it, because it's better to be a specialist in an area and be very good at that, but try to move in something that is not really for you. Because at that point, it limits your capacity to excel, to be recognized in that area. But if you have to do it, then maybe mix that passion for technology in a way that you can convince or influence the people hearing about your message. Steve Jobs comes to mind. I'm sure, I'm not fully familiar with him, but I'm sure that he was a passion for technology, but he also was able to connect emotionally with people. I was hearing the story, a TEDx story about something like PC and Mac and iPhone. When you get a PC, I like PCs because it's technically viable, give me what I want, and I'm easily customizable. But the way that iPhone sells it is a full experience. They create great experiences, experiences that help people to do jobs faster and easier and easy to understand. And they have good technology. Which one do you sell better? It's the one that is easier and have more connection with people. So if you have to move, or people that are in a technical space have to move into the people space, I'll say just start to learn more about, I would say, empathy, about getting more into the people's mindsets, into their communication, and give the importance of emotional intelligence as well as emotion connection, because using the mind is very useful for certain things. It's very useful to get certain results, certain metrics, certain technical aspects. But making a change in people, particularly on behaviors, is an emotional thing. It has to do very little with a mental state, unless they're fully on the mentality side. Yes.
So I'd like to ask a final question and sort of space for the last part of our interview is, you mentioned security marketing for dummies. So can you unpack what engaging stakeholders in adding and protecting value using deep listening and still remaining humble means?
Yeah, so of course, the tone of our conversation that I was trying to give as a value to your podcast is mindfulness and empathy and listening to the person can be applied to cybersecurity. if security practitioners need to be mindful and present to listen to what our customers need from us, our stakeholders, and support them with a solution to the problem or inform what's the risk that they are undertaking. Because many remaining risk will need to be signed off by someone. One of the most important considerations when delivering a message is to use the language that the audience will understand and they're comfortable with, even if it's bad news, even if it's a compromise, even if it's something bad that happened. It is important to remain humble, as we cyber people tend to speak at people rather than to people, expecting that they will understand the context of our own experience and knowledge rather than their experience of the listener, rather than their context. My key message is it's about them, it's not about us. And by being open and shifting the message to be understood by the audience and remaining humble will bring us a credibility that it's missing in the security space.
It's definitely an industry that I've seen, opposed to potential other industries. Like, I don't know a lot about financial services. So I've got a few firms that work with me on those types of questions, but I've never felt that they've treated me like I was a moron because I didn't understand. And you can be across it. I'm obviously not a specialist in that area. That's why I'm going to them to get advice. But I still do feel on the security side of things, like you said, there's that can sometimes come across a bit overbearing sort of approach. Well, you don't understand what I'm talking about. You must be a fool. And that's not necessarily the case. This is something I've seen predominantly in this industry. Why do you still think that is?
I think it might be the frustration that people have with explaining the risk and on the technicalities of the risk. And I think the easier way to explain that is by building stories. Build a story that the people will understand. Build a context. Build the whole environment so people will be able to understand your message. When people say, I don't understand you, they just yell again, I said this. No, I don't understand you. Yeah. I said this. That is going nowhere. The way is to shift the language into something that is understandable by them. Get away from the frustration. If someone in front of you is frustrated, if it's frustrating the practitioner that the people in front of them is not listening, or not understanding, it's probably the fault from the people conveying that message, from the practitioner telling that message. It's not the people's fault that they don't have the context or the knowledge that we have.
How would they know it though? It's not their field.
Exactly. And it's exactly, and we are immersed in this world. Like, I'm not sure if other people do it, but I'm in this role and in this field because I love it. I spend home time and business time going to news and the like, because I really like it. I really love doing this since I was a kid, but other people might not. So how do you explain someone? Yeah, well, to me, it's just funny that you say that, because someone is saying on Monday, oh, it's Monday. And I'm like, yes, it's Monday.
Well, you and I have that in common.
Yeah, there you go. Beauty of finding your passion, right? It's coming to work. It's like, yes, I'm back. I'm back to finish what I didn't finish on Friday. What is that? Like, how do I give more context to these people to allow them to make a better decision? So many times it will be their decision. How can I help them to make a better decision? What information do they need that they are missing that I'm not giving to them that will enable them to make a decision or make this thing that they want to do happen?
It almost feels like people in this industry need to have a comprehensive understanding on how actual people work. I don't mean configuring firewalls. And I think that's something that I personally get asked a lot because, again, we're bridging that gap. And I think it's because understanding people, actually studying behavioral science, sociology, consumer buying, actually studying those things, and then a structural theory is another one, to get, like you said, that context around people. Because where I sort of see a lot of downfall is how to, what's that book called? Win friends and influence people. It's those types of mechanisms that I see lacking and lagging behind in this field. And I think that I constantly see discredited for. It's something that will actually help propel the security division forward, because you've got someone at the coalface, someone like yourself, that actually understands people and how to actually get an outcome by speaking to them in the right way, the right language, by not undermining them, by actually understanding what their frustrations are, and then bridging that gap between bringing the security side of it and the business side of it to actually get a solution. So that's something that I think people listening can go away and think about, because it's what's going to push you from being a good practitioner to a great practitioner.
When people like us get a lot of technicality, we use a certain part of the brain. It's at the left part of the brain. Right? It's all the logical, mathematical, calculated risk. But when it comes to communications, it's more of a creativity sort of side. if anyone is involved heavily on one side of the brain or the other, well, you either have the very technical people, very good at what they do, but not communicating well, or you can have the very good communicators and artists, which handle computers. So how do you train either extreme, or if not extreme, how do you deal with either aspect of this spectrum of how they use the brain? And I think it comes from will. People need to want to do this. If you were an artist that don't know anything about computers and you want to learn, you get into a course, right? You get into how do I use computers? How do I use cybersecurity? How do I use mail? If you're a cybersecurity practitioner, you probably go to Toastmasters or any sort of meetups or something that you meet people outside of your own field of expertise to know how people think. One of the things that really helped me as well to understand the business better is when I completed a certification called Certifying the Governance of Enterprise IT, because it has some context of security, but it was more about how the whole business is governed and what's the IT part of it. And if I can summarize a certification, it's what's the support that IT is giving to the business to deliver the mission or to get their mission or to deliver value. If they want to, they can choose training, move out, meet people to be more fluent and express what they want to do in a better way.
Well, Raf, I've really appreciated you, one, for sharing your story. I think that's probably one of the most vulnerable episodes we've ever had. So I really appreciate that. And I think there's a lot of things that I personally gained from hearing your story, and I'm sure other people will as well. And really talking on a granular level on the comms stuff, because it's something that I think people do need to pay attention to because it is incredibly important. So I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your wisdom there. If people do want to get in touch with you, how can they go about doing that?
Well, there's two ways. I have a vanity domain. It's raf@rafaelchiang.com, or LinkedIn is also a good way to reach me.
Thank you so much for taking the time. Again, I think our listeners will get a wealth of knowledge out of this episode. So I really appreciate you chatting with me.
Oh, thank you for your time. And what you're doing is of great value to anyone trying to get into cyber. You are basically compressing knowledge from a number of experts experienced in cybersecurity in an easy format to digest. I think that's commendable. So congratulations, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your kind words. Thanks, Raf.
No worries. Thanks, Harissa.
Thanks for tuning in. As always, we hope you got some new ideas or ways of thinking from this episode. And remember, you can always reach out to our guests if you do have more questions. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, and we always love to hear your feedback. So leave a review on iTunes and we might just give you a shout out on a future episode. You can find me on LinkedIn as well as on @IamCarissaBreen on Twitter and Instagram. And if you'd like to know more about how we help tech companies, check out carissabreenindustries.com. Until next time, stay safer.